Right, while we're exploring characters, I say we explore the character of Mr. Will Burns.
Will Burns. Onto the interview questions.
The questions. Will,
Yeah.
what's the first book you remember reading and enjoying?
Okay. The first book I remember reading. I'm as it's to do with memory and what books you a book that you remember. I'll go with this one. I'm sure I'd read children's. Well, obviously everyone reads children's books, and I'm sure I'd read other things and enjoyed them before this. But there's a book that looms really large in my memory is Robert Graves' poems about war, which it's a strange one because my mum bought me a really beautiful hardback edition of Robert Graves' war poems, and I think I was going through a kind of martial phase. I was really obsessed with my grandfather's kind of military career and all things to do with war and guns, like lots of young boys, I suppose, and young women. But I think my mum was desperate to sort of show me that there was something else. That there were other aspects to war. That there were that there was a cost and an emotional heft to do with the whole thing. It wasn't simply kind of an outdoor kind of adventurous jape.
I think like your mum introducing you to the concept of the horrors of war.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I suppose I must have been about 11. Like I say, there were definitely books before that.
Of course, yeah.
But this that was a book that really I remember reading and loving, and this is the giveaway. I think for me, it was the first book that I tried to copy. So I consciously wrote. I remember writing at school a sort of war poem that was aping what I'd read in Robert Graves, and that to me tells me how much it sort of lodged its way into my my psyche, really.
I think that sounds exactly like what we're talking about here, doesn't it? Like, actually, what was the jumping off point for your love of this thing? And if you're taking that directly into some very early work, then yeah, that's fascinating. So, what was it? Do you still think you've got some of that meter in what you write now? Do you think it's still sort of embedded in your own style?
No, I think maybe there are lots of things about Graves that I love, but I don't think his music is in my poems so much. I think probably later influences loom larger in terms of kind of like the voices that you aren't able to kind of get rid of, and perhaps some of the big American poets. But he's still in there, and maybe even in the prose a little bit more. Things like the White Goddess and sort of slightly obsessive, long clause sentences, repetitions of things. He's maybe in there with that in that kind of way.
It's fascinating. I like this. I like the finding out what caused people to pick up their pens for the first time and really mean it. Not just being told to do it at school, but you were saying that you, without being prompted, were trying to do it. That's very cool. I like that a lot.
So that was your jumping off point. Do you have a favourite novel?
Well, again, I'm going to have to plump for this. It's 50-50 between Lawrence Durrell's Alexandria Quartet and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, but I'm going to have to go for Tolkien, even though it's nowhere near as cool. But I read Lord of the Rings every year in January until I was about 27. I can't, from a kind of, I read it a couple of times as a teenager, and then at some point, it became a little kind of tradition that I had, until until I met somebody who gave me better things to do, I suppose. But yeah, I used to like reading it in January, and so it's the book I've read the most. It's a book I feel incredible amount of affection towards. I never tire of talking about it. I could reread it tomorrow, and I wouldn't be bored. So yeah, it would have to be that Lord of the Rings.
One of us.
Yeah.
One of us.
We're getting dangerously close to your shirt, I think. With
Yeah.
I drink, I read Lord of the Rings, I fuck. The whole like especially in the earlier book sections of the Lord of the Rings, that kind of bucolic aspect, this countryside enjoyment, the descriptions of long walks and forestry. I'm seeing a link there between what you've chosen for your debut novel and what you cite as your favorite novel, which is possibly a really lovely link.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that people you might pick up on, on the face of it, but
Of course, yeah.
but yeah, I think that Tolkien, as a nature writer, if you want to use a slightly kind of strange construction, is that's definitely a kind of a topic that exists in my head, in my imagination. It's there in my reading of the work as well. I think of it as I think of the books as an essay in kind of Northern European language and Northern European history and mythology, but also I read them as an ode, if you like, to kind of England and the English landscape, and that it's probably the bit that I take with me into my own work the most, and I think would be is a genuine influence.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. Does that mean that you have a bit of a disconnect between? I mean, it would be quite natural to have a disconnect in this regard, but have a bit of a disconnect between the obviously the novels and the way that they have been portrayed in the very famous Peter Jackson movies, because the main difference is obviously that's fucking New Zealand, rather than all of these descriptions of what's clearly England in the Lord of the Rings, or at least some of it anyway.
Yeah, I do have a no. I can go there. I can go with it because the landscape of Middle Earth has changed since the age of Numenor. Anyway, there are big bits of land that no longer exist.
I'm loving this. We're digging in. I love it.
In the same way that they did, in the previous ages. So there are topographical changes that you have to kind of accept in your imaginative version of Middle Earth, and so I can kind of go with the idea that that a filmmaker might make the decision to kind of up the to up the kind of the stakes, if you like, to raise the stakes with the scenery. And in some ways, I think of New Zealand as a kind of England on steroids anyway. If you think about to get into an even more nerdy kind of realm, if you like, the conditions, if you watch cricket, the conditions in New Zealand are probably as close anywhere in the world as they are to England. Green pitches, a bit of swing, temperate climate.
Sheep on the hills.
Yeah. So in some ways, it's not as big a leap as it might have been. So, and like we've said in the story, and in the paper lantern, I hit upon it. If Peter Jackson had tried to film it in the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire hills, well, he'd have wouldn't be able to walk 2 fields without HS2 work, or an A road, or so there are practical ideas at play as well, I suppose.
I mean, Isengard's Edgbaston, isn't it? Like all the Uruks that have Brummy accents.
Yeah.
I've also got to say that is the first time anyone's answered a question by citing the fall of Numenor on this podcast, and I'm very excited about that.
So that is a book series that is full of songs, right?
Yeah.
But do you listen to music when you're writing? And if you do, what kind of stuff do you listen to?
No, I don't.
Ah,
I love music and it's been a big part of my life. But I can't really stomach any noise really. When I'm writing, my writing process has sort of two main strands. One is walking, and that's like that's the real sort of nitty gritty of it. I write a lot when I walk. So in some ways, there is rhythm occurring. There's the rhythm of my gait, I suppose. The feet on the floor. There's the sounds around me, and then there's the kind of writing up of the notes, which for that I need pretty much I need silence.
So you're
Um,
actually writing whilst you're walking.
yeah, I'd say I've got a little notebook. Always use the same notebooks, and just little pocket sized notebook, little
Yeah.
little pencil or a little pen, and yeah, stop when I get a line or a strand or a thread or something like that,
It's
and write
Wordsworthy, is that, isn't
right
it? I
away.
think that's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
you really are putting the Shire in Buckinghamshire, aren't you?
Yeah. So it's particularly interesting because obviously you actually have released an album with your poetry on it set to music,
yeah. Yeah.
which is fascinating for a start, but also interesting in this regard. Like, so did you work with the artist in order to get that rhythm that you wrote it with into the music?
Yeah, we worked pretty closely together, and it was genuinely sort of collaborative in the sense that we you know what bits of music that Hannah Peel was the composer, bits of music that she started to play or started to kind of put together would trigger um ideas for me about what poems we might or might not kind of use with them, whether it was like a tone of a synthesizer or the sound of a particular instrument that might have suggested a word or a line to me, or whether there were rhythmic decisions to be made. What we did find was that it was very very hard to read poems to anything that had what you might call a beat. So
Yeah.
there are songs on that album and pieces of music on that album that have rhythm. One that almost has what you might call a beat. But for the most part, we had to make it quite ambient and sort of beatless, really, because
Yeah.
the poetry has such a innate rhythm of its own. Language has and poetry has beats, and it was quite hard to kind of mold those or pull them around to something as staccato as a drum beat, or not staccato, something as kind of regular, I suppose, as a drum
Yeah, I
beat
see what you
actually.
mean.
It's so interesting. Obviously, I have to write lyrics for music, and so much of what I do relies on hearing what the riff's going to be, hearing the drum beat, and it starts as noises. So it'll be like, and you think, okay, that's where the tune goes. So what fits those sounds? Whereas you're coming at it from completely the opposite end, but in theory doing a very similar thing.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I
Just
mean that to
so
me.
people know where we are with this. Sorry, so you can actually go and listen to this. This is Chalk Hill Blue, with Will Burns and Hannah Peel,
Yeah.
and it's very easily findable online because I listened to it earlier. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say that what Nico described there is pretty much what I see as the difference. You get been asked a few times about the difference between writing lyrics and writing a poem, and that sums it up for me. The lyric writing process is very much, or it seems to, at least in my experience and when speaking to other people, seems to be so wedded with the sounds that might come first,
Yeah.
sounds that work with the chords and work with a melody that you might have come up with. That you know that and then you're finding language to fit music. Whereas with the poem, you know you've the language is the sort of first port of call, the word itself.
Like, I guess the kind of the process is just happening for a different person. Your poetry might be melancholy, and that might lead to melancholy sounds. Whereas if you're just writing lyrics to a piece of music, and it sounds sad, you think, okay, so what's sad that I want to write about that fits this? So it's kind of like an inversion, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And I think you're spot on about melancholic sounds as well. Poetry has to have a sort of sound sense that in a song you can provide by choice of instrumentation in a way. And so yeah, basically it's you're putting all the same kind of pieces together, if you like, but you're putting them together in a different order. And some bits are missing in the poem or the song, and vice versa.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So let's drive this back towards books, because I could do this for hours. What is the least enjoyable trope of fiction for you?
Well, to write about, or to experience it from a reading point of view.
Digest, I guess.
I suppose I find that's a really difficult. It's a really difficult question.
I am a renowned bastard. Yes.
What would it be? What would it be? I suppose I find a kind of boy meets girl romance a little uninspiring. But that might be because it feels slightly well worn, and perhaps not particularly reflective of of the kind of sexual and romantic, for want of a better word, sort of mores of the time, I guess. So
is that like a non-love at first sight thing? You mean, like, that's the...
Yeah, but I think the boy meets girl, the kind of the gender idea of that, the kind of the setup of the it seems like a quite obvious way of shoehorning too much of a reliance on the 3-act structure of fiction type writing. We're going to give these two characters a couple of obstacles that they've got to overcome, and then they're going to they're going to fall in love, and whereas I think love in its sort of true wonderful experiential sense is actually really complicated and messy, and very rarely involves just two people, and actually our sexual selves are much more, I think our sexual selves are much more complicated than that kind of fiction sometimes allows for. So I suppose, yeah, really, probably I'd come down on a sort of a really standard boy meets girl romantic fiction sort of. I suppose that's a set of tropes, really, but yeah, that's...
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I can see why you've gone there as well. And actually, just to go one step further, so you don't have to agree with this, but I actually do sort of feel like propagating it is kind of dangerous, and I think it's quite damaging, because so many people get screwed up by this idea of how they think their romantic, their sexual, their love-based relationships need to go. And as you say, it's been coloured by books, movies, TV shows, whatever, in this very regimented 3-act structure, and that is not how life works. And I think a lot of people get, at the very least, hurt by that, and at the worst, I think they get twisted up inside when they get worried about how they don't match up to how they should be
Yeah,
in a relationship or in bed or whatever.
yeah,
The thing that's really bothersome, whenever it's always in films they do this, they never have the people talk to each other properly.
yeah,
And the amount of movies that if they just had one conversation,
yeah.
there wouldn't be, they walk in and they're like, "Oh my God, you were having sex with my sister." No, I've broken my leg and she was wrapping up, but it looked like she was near my dick. So just, if you asked either of us,
Yeah, yeah,
but no, there's another 30 minutes we need to pad of screen time in this.
yeah. Completely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. That was yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
Actually, that does lead us quite nicely. If you could take any book in the world, and adapt it into another medium,
All right.
what book would it be? To which medium and why?
Well, I think something like the Alexandria Quartet could be made into a really quite incredible sort of long TV series. The amazing characters, amazing locations. You might lose some of Lawrence Durrell's incredible prose, but I think you could maybe do something like the makers of the Elena Ferrante TV adaptations have done, which I think are incredible. So I think that's what I would do if it were me. And we might get Lawrence Durrell back in the popular imagination, which I think would be a good thing.
Yeah, I have to say these aren't in my head at all. So it sounds like they would be very much up my street, though. So my vaguest understanding is that they have stuff to do with pre-Second World War history. Is that
Yeah.
of,
Yes.
of like North Africa and stuff?
That's right. Yeah. So I
Right.
mean, it's been a while since I read them, but yeah, it's that phase of history, and so you've got the kind of the slipperiness of ideas of what constitutes Europe and Africa and different countries, the sense that the kind of world is about to be redrawn, and then sort of like wonderful cosmopolitan uh, amalgam of cultures and languages in Alexandria, the city itself. So it's a drawing of a city, and it's a drawing of a set of lives that kind of intertangle even rather than intermingle. There's lots of kind of very modern, kind of slippery sexuality stuff going on. It talks about it's about the nature of art and art making. It's just it's fantastic.
It does sound like it's begging for it, really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
With like a decent budget, a good cast. There's been so much TV being made so well recently in like the last 10 years or so, maybe even 20, that I could really see this being
yeah.
put into a big show.
There's
It's
like
very
100
cool.
streaming services now. One of them can do it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
pick one.
absolutely. They I'm happy to work on it if anyone's listening.
Yeah. Hire Will immediately.
We know you're listening. I'm not going to say any of their names. They're probably well litigious, right?
Alarm bells ringing somewhere at.
Wait. So, if people want to get into your work, where can they start reading you? And do you have anything new coming out soon?
Well, I suppose the best place to start really would be with the Paper Lantern, available in all good and not good bookshops. I've got a
The evil bookshops.
I've been
yes. I've also got a fairly big archive of kind of prose and poetry pieces on a website called Caught by the River, which is a sort of nature writing journal online place, and I recommend everybody go and check Caught by the River out anyway, because it's just a fantastic thing. Loads of good writers, loads of interesting stuff on there. So that I would tell people to head there really, and buy the book.
And where can people go on your socials? Because you use Twitter, right? I think.
I'm on Twitter as Troubled Striker. So that's the only social media
Sure.
that I've taken the plunge into, and that's plenty for me. That sees me through. I don't think I
Yeah.
could take any more distractions, really.
You
No,
wish to
I mean-
find him, Benjamin. You must look between the hills and dells.
Go for a nice wander, I think.
Yeah,
But then I feel like I was interrupting your writing process. Like if I saw you walking somewhere with a notepad,
Oh
I'd
no,
just let you go on your way. I'd just be like, yeah, no, he's busy.
no, I always like a chat. I mean, in real life, I'm quite easily found in a pub in Wendover, Buckinghamshire, called the King and Queen. You could find me there most evenings between 5 and 8 o'clock.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm fairly sure we'll have to come and buy you a pint at some point because this has been fantastic talking to you.
That sounds great.
So thank you very much for coming and for your lovely story and some excellent answers that have really got me going. So thank you again.
Thanks both for having me on.
Be in Wendover in 20 minutes.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For rich ginger tones on the scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?